10 hours on an operating table, and I came back to 64 missed calls. My throat felt scraped raw from the tube. A rigid brace pinned my back before my legs had fully remembered they belonged to me. My phone kept flashing beside the hospital bed, and the first voicemail was from my father. His voice was calm enough to be insulting. "Natalie, don't get worked up. We sold your condo to cover Ashley's wedding. You were under anesthesia, so we signed where we needed to. 438,000. It's all taken care of." Taken care of. My home had been sold while strangers kept me breathing. The wedding was less than a month away, and I could barely curl my fingers around the phone. But I made one call anyway. What followed was not the quiet, grateful surrender my family had built their plan around. Welcome back to Dull Pain Stories, where families reveal themselves fastest when they believe you are too weak to push back, and where the person everyone calls dependable finally lets the truth speak in a room full of witnesses. If you have ever been told your sacrifice should be automatic because you were the strong one, this one may feel uncomfortably familiar. A nurse named Rachel Mills came in to check my vitals and tell me the operation had gone well. Nearly 10 hours, 3 spinal levels fused, one old injury finally repaired the way it should have been years earlier. Usually I was the surgical nurse watching the monitors, organizing instruments, reading a room before anyone spoke. Now I was the patient lying flat, dry-mouthed, half-numb and furious at how helpless my body felt. I asked Rachel to play the message again. Part of me still hoped the anesthesia had twisted the words into something impossible. It had not. Mark Harper, my father, sounded cheerful in that careful way he used when he had already decided the other person would forgive him. I stared at the ceiling grid, letting each word settle into place. Sold. Signed, under anesthesia, my name. I have worked in operating rooms long enough to know what panic costs. You do not panic in the first few seconds. You assess. So I assessed. Someone had placed my signature on a real estate document while I was unconscious inside that same hospital. That was not a misunderstanding. It was a false signature or a dead legal authority being dragged out of the grave. "Rachel," I said, though my voice came out rough and thin, "I need my anesthesia record, full timeline, every time stamp." She looked at me for a beat, probably wondering whether the drugs were making me paranoid. Then she nodded. I was not paranoid. I was already building a case before I even knew what the case was. Because whoever put my name on that deed had done it while I had a breathing tube down my throat and a surgeon working inside my spine. People think the steady one will bend forever. They forget the steady one remembers where every chart is kept. To understand why that condo mattered, you have to understand that it was never just a place to sleep. I bought it at 31, 3 years after my second deployment as an Army medic. The loan officer had looked at me like I was overly ambitious. Single woman, hospital salary, back injury that made cold mornings feel like punishment. But I had saved as if the mission depended on it. I skipped trips, ate leftovers in break rooms, volunteered for weekend shifts, and put every spare dollar into that down payment. The first night after closing, I sat on the floor of a second-floor unit with no furniture, no curtains, and a view of a narrow parking lot beside a strip of pale evening sky. I cried because the key in my palm belonged only to me. For 7 years I paid that mortgage down. 7 years of double shifts, cheap coffee, and saying no to things I wanted because I wanted that door more. By the week of my surgery, I had a little over $312,000 in equity inside those walls. That figure was not greed. It was every early alarm and every holiday shift I had traded for the first safe, private, fully mine place I had ever owned. My family knew that. That is the part I still cannot make soft. About 5 months before surgery, my father had asked whether I would consider borrowing against the condo to help make Ashley's wedding something special. He tried to make it sound casual, almost like a joke said over coffee. I told him no before he finished the sentence. I thought no ended the conversation. I have since learned that some people hear no as a temporary inconvenience, Here is what people misunderstand about me. They think I missed the danger because I trusted my family. I saw enough to worry. After that kitchen table conversation, I did 3 things. First, I told my father directly and without apology that my condo was not part of anyone else's wedding budget. His jaw tightened, but he smiled anyway. Second, I called my bank and asked them to flag unusual movement on my accounts. Something about the way he had looked past me, not at me, stayed in my head. Third, and most important, I pulled out an old power of attorney. Years earlier, before deploying, I had signed an emergency POA naming my father in case something happened overseas, and someone needed to handle bills, storage, or a lease. I had never formally canceled it. 3 days before my surgery, while I was drowning in pre-op paperwork, I signed a written revocation. I revoked that power of attorney, dated it, scanned it, and printed a copy. Then I drove to my parents' house and handed it to my father across his own kitchen table. "Just cleaning up old documents before I go under," I said. He took the paper, nodded, and set it beside a ceramic bowl of oranges like it meant nothing. I went home feeling protected. That may be the cruelest part of all of this, the clean little relief of believing you have done the careful thing. Because somehow, while I was unconscious, my name still appeared on a deed. The authority I had killed had apparently gotten up and walked into a closing office without me. They discharged me 5 days after surgery. My surgeon was pleased with the images. The hardware looked solid. My pain was controlled well enough on oral medication, and I could shuffle a hallway with a walker, which meant insurance considered me finished with the bed. The real problem arrived when an orderly wheeled me toward the hospital doors. I had nowhere to recover. The condo I had prepared so carefully, the adjustable bed angled just right, the bathroom rails I had installed myself, the clear walkway from bedroom to kitchen, now belonged, at least on paper, to someone else. I could not drive. I was on muscle relaxers. My brace ran from my hips to my shoulders. I was not allowed to twist, bend, or lift anything heavier than a small bag of groceries. So I called Grace Collins. Grace had been my friend since nursing orientation 13 years earlier. She was the kind of friend who arrived with a cooler, a charger, and enough opinions to run a small government. She picked me up in her SUV and drove me to a furnished short-term rental 3 miles from the hospital. It was beige, anonymous, and smelled faintly like lemon cleaner and strangers' vacations. She helped me into bed, lined up my medication bottles, and made me drink broth while I argued that broth was not food. While she fussed, I pulled a new notebook from my bag. The Army taught me that when the room turns chaotic, you make a list and you work the list. On the first page, I wrote dates. Surgery, voicemail, claimed signing. Possible closing, I left space for times I did not have yet. Grace watched me write with my left hand because my right shoulder still refused to cooperate. "Natalie," she said softly, "who are you calling first? Your mother?" I shook my head. The first call was not going to Linda Harper, who had already texted me 12 times with frantic hearts and exclamation points. It was not going to my father either. Even Grace looked surprised when I told her. I called a real estate attorney. Daniel Whitaker had been recommended by a coworker who had survived a miserable divorce and spoke of him like a man who kept matches away from gasoline. I called his office the next morning while propped on 3 pillows and described the situation in the same flat tone I used for operating room handoffs. Patient stable. Property sold. Signature questionable. Former POA possibly misused. Owner unconscious. Daniel listened without interrupting. When I finished, he asked 3 questions. Was there ever a power of attorney naming your father? Yes, old emergency 1. Did you revoke it? Yes, 3 days before surgery, in writing. Who bought the property? I did not know. There was a pause long enough that I could hear office noise through the line. Then he said, "Natalie, if a deed was executed under a power you had already revoked, that deed may be worthless. But we prove that one step at a time. Nobody simply hands you that result. Nobody hands you that result." I almost laughed, which hurt my back so badly that I stopped. Nobody in my life had handed me anything I did not pay for one way or another. "Get me every closing document," he said. "Recorded deed, settlement statement, notary section, title file. Do not argue details with your family. Let them talk. Write down what they say, and find out the buyer's name." After we hung up, I underlined one question so hard the pen tip tore the paper. Who bought my home? My parents came to the rental that afternoon because of course they did. Linda Harper entered first carrying supermarket flowers and a pan of baked ziti, as if carnations and pasta could cover a fraudulent transfer. My father stayed behind her with his hands in his pockets, wearing the injured but reasonable face he saved for people he had wronged. "Sweetheart," my mother said, setting the flowers near the sink, "we have been absolutely sick with worry." "You called 64 times after surgery," I said. "Not before." Her mouth tightened, but she kept moving, talking faster now, words tumbling out in the order she had rehearsed on the drive. They had been forced into a corner. Vendors needed deposits. The venue would not hold the date. The market was strong. They would make everything right later. I should not upset myself while healing. Then she said the phrase that followed me for weeks. "Natalie, it is only a condo. Your sister is getting married once." Only a condo. This was the woman who had helped me carry boxes up the stairs when I first moved in. She had stood in that bare kitchen and said she was proud of me. Now the home I had built dollar by dollar had become only a condo because Ashley wanted centerpieces and a designer dress. My father finally spoke. "You have always been tougher than Ashley. We knew you would understand. She needed this. You don't." I did not raise my voice. The calmest voice in a room is the one people remember later when they are trying to rewrite what happened. "Who notarized my signature?" I asked. Steam from the ziti curled between us. My mother looked at my father. My father looked at the carpet. "It was handled correctly," he said. "People only say that when they know it was not." Then he made his first useful mistake. "Victor handled the paperwork side." Victor. I kept my face still, but in my head I boxed the name in red. Before they left, my mother added the part meant to make me feel trapped. The money had already gone out, deposits on the venue. The gown paid in full, a room block in the Bahamas. If I acted rashly, she said while smoothing my blanket like I was a child with a fever, I would destroy Ashley's wedding. 24 days, she whispered. Just 24 days and then everyone can breathe. There it was, the deadline as a weapon. They believed the calendar protected them. They thought I would never tear open a wedding already in motion. They thought I would swallow more than $310,000 because making a scene would be worse. For one exhausted, medicated minute, I could almost see how their math worked. Then the part of me that had been trained for emergencies took over. A deadline is not a feeling. It is a number on a timeline, and timelines are readable. 24 days was not their advantage. It was my window. After they left, I stared at the name Victor in my notebook until the ink blurred. Then another problem dropped into me like a stone. To prove the deed was void, Daniel would need the revocation. My printed copy, the one my father had set beside the oranges, was probably gone. My file box, with the deployment binder and older documents, was in the condo closet. The condo I no longer had keys to. I had protected myself with paper, and they had locked the rest of my paper inside the thing they stole. If you have ever been the reliable one everyone leaned on right up until the day you could not stand, you know how that kind of betrayal lands. Stay with this, because the exact minute written in the notary journal changed everything. Daniel moved fast. Within 3 days, he had pulled the recorded deed from the county records and requested the title file. He emailed the scans, and Grace held my laptop because sitting upright still sent pain down my back like sparks. There it was, the document that claimed to erase 7 years of my life. The buyer's name appeared in clean black type. Victor Bennett. I knew him. Everyone in my family knew him. Victor was my father's business partner, the man who had built half-finished retail plazas with him for 17 years. He came to Thanksgiving sometimes, drank my parents' whiskey, and complained about subcontractors as if the world existed to disappoint him. The sale had been all cash. The price made me cold. $318,000, not $438,000, not market value. My condo, worth around $438,000, had been transferred to my father's own business partner for $318,000 cash. Even through pain medication, I understood what I was looking at. That was not a normal sale. It was a quiet dump to a connected buyer. A number low enough to move quickly and high enough to pretend there had been value. My father had lied in the voicemail too. The $438,000 he had tossed out like reassurance had never existed. He had let my home go for $318,000, and whatever gap sat between that number and its value had disappeared into something he did not want me to see. Daniel said it plainly when we spoke. An all-cash sale below market to a close business associate of the person claiming authority under a power of attorney is not one red flag. It is a row of flares on the highway. Then he named the title company. I recognized that, too. It was a small office my father used often, run by a man he played golf with twice a month. Every door in the story opened into the same little circle of men nodding at one another across desks. And the signature, Daniel added carefully. I have your real signature on our engagement letter. The one on this deed is not a clean match. We will need to examine that. That night, sleep never came. Grace pulled up every signature of mine she could find. Driver's license, hospital consent forms, an old holiday card in my bag, a receipt from a continuing education seminar. We put them side by side with the signature on the deed. My N starts with a hard downward slash because I have signed charts too quickly for too many years. The deed signature was rounder, slower, almost decorative, as if someone had traced the idea of my name. Close enough to fool someone who did not know me. Not close enough to fool me, but the letters were not what made the room tilt. The notary section at the bottom did that. The notary had certified that Natalie Harper personally appeared, produced identification, and signed in her presence. The stamp carried the date of my surgery. Daniel told me something I had not needed to know before. Notaries keep journals. Good ones record the time each signer appears. He had already demanded a copy. When the journal entry came back, the time was written in neat blue ink. 2:18 p.m. on the day of my surgery at 2:18 in the afternoon, a notary swore that I stood before her, alert and willing, and signed away my home. I lowered the laptop to the blanket and breathed carefully. I knew roughly where I had been at 2:18. Roughly was not enough. I needed it pinned down by the minute in hospital records on letterhead. I needed to know where my body was when someone claimed I was signing a deed, and I knew exactly which department could tell me. Ashley called the next morning. My little sister, 28, the bride. Her voice had that thin, stretched sound halfway between guilt and irritation. Natalie, why are you turning this into a fight right now? I said nothing. Silence makes people who are hiding something reach for more words. She filled the space. Mom and Dad had said they found money. She did not ask how. She had fittings, guest counts, a future mother-in-law to impress, and 1,000 details. She assumed everything was handled. Handled, again, the family word for something done to me. You assumed it was handled, I said. Ashley, they sold my home. There was a pause. Then she said it, softer than Mom, but in the exact same rhythm. It's only a condo, Nat, my own sister. The phrase had moved through the family like a recipe card. I closed my eyes and felt something inside me become quiet. Ashley had not drafted a deed. She had not imitated my name, but she had chosen not to know because knowing might have made her wedding less beautiful. Did you ever ask whose money was paying the venue? I asked. No, she said after a moment. I didn't want to. That was the whole family system in one sentence. Nobody had to hate me to take from me. They only had to look away comfortably enough. Natalie was dependable. Natalie would recover. Natalie would understand. Natalie was a resource that replenished itself. I love you, I said, and I ended the call before my voice changed. Then I called medical records and requested my complete surgical file. Every page, every time. I wanted to look Victor Bennett in the face. Grace drove me to his office 2 days later, a low brick building near an access road with his name on a brushed metal sign. I moved slowly, cane in one hand, brace hidden under my coat but impossible to forget. His receptionist went pale when she recognized me. Victor stood behind his desk when I entered and managed to look uncomfortable for perhaps 3 seconds. Then the reasonable man mask settled over him. "Natalie," he said, gesturing toward a chair. "Looks like recovery is coming along. You bought my condo." I did not sit. Sitting hurt, standing also made the point better. "Your father had legal authority," Victor said, spreading his hands. "Cash deal, recorded properly. Nothing improper on my end. You paid $318,000 for a $438,000 property from a man whose daughter was unconscious in surgery." He did not even blink. That told me more than an answer would have. "Mark and I go back a long time," he said. "He had obligations. This evened things out." Obligations. Evened things out. So that was the engine underneath the wedding story. My condo had not merely paid for flowers and music. It had also patched a business debt my father owed to his partner, with Ashley's perfect day laid over the top like wrapping paper. Victor leaned back, now comfortable enough to show his teeth. "If I were you, I would let this settle. Proving anything while recovering from surgery is not exactly easy." I looked at him for a long moment. Then I smiled the small, calm smile I use right before explaining to a patient that their favorite plan is unsafe. "I have done harder work flat on my back," I said. "You may be surprised by what I can prove from a hospital bed." The surgical records arrived in a thick envelope the next day. I read them as I had read thousands of charts, only this time the body in the chart was mine. An anesthesia record is a beautiful thing when someone tries to invent your presence elsewhere. Anesthesiologists document by law, by habit, and by survival. Induction at 10:36 a.m. Intubation confirmed. Lines placed. Positioning. Time out. Then columns and columns of vitals, blood pressure, oxygen saturation, heart rate, medications, carrying straight through the afternoon in regular blocks. At 2:15 p.m., my chart noted stable rhythm and pressure within range. Surgeon working on the lower level. At 2:20, same. And at 2:18 p.m., the exact minute a notary claimed I had appeared before her and signed my name, I was prone on an operating table with a tube in my throat, drugs in my veins, and another person's hands inside my open back. I read the page twice, then a third time. This was not a family disagreement anymore. It was not even a credibility contest. It was one timestamp against another. My signature had been certified at the same minute a machine was breathing for me. There was no honest version of those facts that made the deed real. I called Daniel and read him the Times. For the first time, I heard the restrained excitement lawyers get when a fact locks into place. "That is about as clean an alibi as one sees," he said. "It proves you did not personally sign. It strongly supports forgery. But for the deed to collapse completely against the buyer, our strongest weapon is still the revocation. We need proof the power of attorney was dead before they used it." The revocation. The paper I had handed my father was gone. The old binder was in the condo closet. I spent half the night staring into the dark, angry that the most important document seemed to be sitting behind a door they had taken from me. Around 3:40 in the morning, memory struck so sharply that I tried to sit up and paid for it immediately. Pain cracked across my back. I grabbed the bed rail and breathed through it, then reached for my phone. I am careful to an annoying degree. My friends have teased me for years. Before deployments, we learned to back up important documents in more places than seemed reasonable, because originals disappear, laptops break, and sometimes you do not come home to the same world you left. When I signed the revocation 3 days before surgery, I had not only printed it. I had scanned it. I had photographed it. And I had emailed a copy to myself and to Sarah Miller, an old legal assistance contact from my Army days, asking her to tell me if the wording looked sufficient. I opened my sent folder with shaking fingers and searched revocation. There it was, Sent 3 days before surgery. 5 days before the deed was recorded. Attached, signed, dated revocation of power of attorney. The metadata was clear. Time, date, recipient. I had already killed the authority before anyone used it to take my home. I forwarded the email to Daniel at 3:48 a.m. with one sentence. Found it. Check the date. He called at 7:12. Natalie, he said, and I could hear the smile he was trying to keep professional. This changes the posture of everything. With the revocation predating the deed and the notary certifying your signature while you were under general anesthesia, we argue void, not merely defective. That is the fight we want. Daniel laid out the plan like a surgeon explaining a complicated repair. That helped. I understand procedures better than comfort. We would move on several fronts at once. First, a quiet title action in civil court, asking a judge to declare the deed void because the power of attorney had been revoked before use, and because the signature itself was impossible. If the deed was void, it had conveyed nothing. The condo never legally left me, no matter what the county records currently said. Second, a criminal referral. Using a revoked power of attorney and signing a property owner's name to a deed was not family drama. It was potential forgery, fraud, and financial abuse. That belonged with police and prosecutors, not around my mother's kitchen table. Third, a claim against the title company and its underwriter. Their notary had certified an appearance that my anesthesia record proved could not have happened. Title insurance exists for disasters like forged deeds. You decide each move, Daniel said. I draft, I file, but you choose. That mattered more than he could know. Nobody was rescuing me. I was picking up one instrument at a time and using it. Then came his warning. Once we filed the quiet title action and recorded a notice of pending litigation against the condo, it would become public. Victor would not be able to sell or refinance. The property would be frozen, which was good, but my family would know within days. There is no silent way to do this, he said. Not if you want it done correctly. I looked at the calendar pinned to the rental wall. 20 days until the wedding. The rehearsal dinner sat even closer. Then we do it loudly, I said, but on my timing. I want to be honest about the hard part. It was not fear of being called selfish. That label had been thrown at me too often to still bruise. The hard part was understanding that my father could face criminal charges. Real ones. Ones that would follow him into every room. My mother must have sensed what was coming because she called that evening already crying. Natalie, please, she said before I had even said hello. Whatever you are planning, don't. Are you really willing to put your father through court over money, over a building? She knew which thread to pull. I sat with the phone against my ear and let myself feel the weight of it. I could stop the escalation. I could also pay for what they had done by letting them keep the thing they stole. Mom, I said, I did not forge anyone's name. I did not sell property that belonged to someone else. Dad did that. You helped him do that. I am refusing to fund it with 7 years of my life. You sound so cold. I sound clear. Those look the same to people who depended on me staying warm enough to rob. I ended the call gently. I did not scream. I did not threaten. I simply made the decision I would hold for the next 2 weeks. I would file. I would let the legal machinery start moving. But I would not explode in a driveway or over the phone. I would choose the room where the truth would land with the most witnesses and the least noise from me. There was only one room like that. We filed. Daniel walked me through every signature over video, and I signed each page with my real sharp N, the one no one could imitate while I watched. My back throbbed. My hand did not shake. The quiet title complaint went to civil court. A notice of pending litigation was recorded against the condo, freezing it. Victor Bennett could not sell it, borrow against it, or pass it along to some unsuspecting buyer. His clean cash purchase had turned radioactive in the county records. That same week, Daniel delivered the packet to a detective in the Financial Crimes Unit. Her name was Detective Lauren Diaz. She called me herself to confirm the timeline. I read her the anesthesia record. I read her the revocation date. I described the voicemail. There was a silence on her end that I recognized from hospital work. the silence of someone realizing the facts had arranged themselves too neatly to ignore. The first wave hit quickly. I learned through my mother's furious texts that Victor had called my father in a panic the moment the notice appeared during a routine title check. The deal was supposed to sink into the county records and never draw attention. Instead, it was flagged, frozen, and sitting on a detective's desk. The tone from my family changed. No more sweetheart. No more casseroles. The messages became sharper. How could I? Did I understand what I was doing to Ashley? Was I trying to destroy everyone? Under every call and text, I could feel pressure building toward a single date, the rehearsal dinner 9 days away. 2 families would gather in one expensive room. They assumed I would stay home healing and ashamed. I had a brace, a cane, a leather folder, and an invitation. People kept calling it only a condo. It was 7 years of my life and the first door that ever closed behind me without someone else holding the key. If you have ever set a boundary and watched the people who benefited from your lack of one call it cruel, you understand this in your bones. My father came to the rental alone 3 days later. There were no flowers this time, no casserole, no performance through my mother. He looked older than I had seen him look in years, gray at the edges, shirt wrinkled as if he had slept in it. He sat on the beige couch, elbows on knees, and put his face in his hands. "The Harbor Ridge deal collapsed," he said without looking at me. "I lost money I did not have. I owed Victor $156,000. I could not pay him." I stayed quiet. "And the Whitmans," he swallowed. "Ashley's future in-laws have money, real money. David Whitman owns dealerships all over the state. Margaret walks into a room and people make space. I could not have them thinking we were some broke little family throwing a cheap wedding. I could not look like a failure." His voice cracked. I believed him. That was the worst part. I believed his shame, his panic, his pride. It changed nothing. Then he lifted his head and asked for what he had really come to ask. "Drop it until after the wedding. Just until then. Let Ashley have the day. After that, we will fix the condo, I swear to you." Even crying, he was asking me to pay, not lend, not help, pay. "You did not borrow from me," I said. "You did not even just steal from me. You erased me. You put someone else's hand on my name and sold the only thing that proved I had built a life no one gave me." He stood. The softness drained out of him the moment it failed to work. "You are going to humiliate this family," he said from the doorway. "You will regret it." "No," I said. "I really will not." After he left, I did the thing I do when my hands start shaking. I organized. At the little rental kitchen table, I built the cleanest folder of my life. Page 1. The revocation of power of attorney, signed and dated, printed with the email timestamp beside it. Page 2. The deed with the questionable signature, paired with the notary journal showing 2:18 p.m. Page 3. The anesthesia record, the column that showed my vitals at 2:15, 2:18, and 2:20 while I was intubated. Page 4. The recorded deed showing Victor Bennett paid $318,000 cash for a property worth about $438,000. Page 5. A short letter from Daniel stating in lawyer language that a deed executed under a revoked power of attorney and bearing a signature certified while the owner was under general anesthesia was void. I made 4 copies. I did not write a speech. The documents were the speech. Then I practiced the harder part. Standing. Grace had brought me a cane that did not look medical, dark wood with a plain handle. I stood at the kitchen table until the room stopped tilting. Then I walked to the wall and back. Again. My brace kept my spine straight as a post. My physical therapist would have been proud and furious at the same time. Every lap hurt. Every lap proved something. They expected a woman who could not stand up. I intended to walk into that dining room on my own feet. Ashley called 5 days before the wedding. This time there was no rehearsed sweetness in her voice. "A detective went to Dad's office," she said. "Natalie, what is actually happening?" So I told her, not the angry version, the true one, short and plain, the old power of attorney, the revocation 3 days before surgery, the deed signed while I was under anesthesia. The notary journal at 2:18, Victor Bennett, the business debt, the undermarket cash sale. I laid it out like a chart and then stopped talking. The silence lasted so long that I thought the call had dropped. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded small. They told me you wanted to help. There it was. The lie that had kept her conscience clean. I never agreed to help, I said. I was unconscious. I heard her breathing change. The venue, she said slowly, the dress, all of it. It came from my home. My wedding is built on your condo. Yes, she did not give me a full apology. Not then, she did not make a promise. But something in her had shifted. For the first time, she had asked the right question, what actually happened? And she did not like the answer any more than I did. I have to go, she whispered, and the line went dead. The rehearsal dinner was at Pine Hollow Country Club, the sort of place with valet parking, high ceilings, and fireplaces large enough to look theatrical even in warm weather. The Whitmans were paying for the dinner itself, a fact my mother had mentioned at least 30 times, because the Whitmans were the audience my parents had sold me to impress. David Whitman owned a chain of car dealerships. Margaret Whitman wore pearls that looked inherited and spoke with the relaxed authority of a woman used to being accommodated. They were exactly the kind of people my father had been terrified of disappointing. That was why the truth belonged in that room. My father's crime had been about appearances. He had stolen from me so he could stand before these people and look generous, solvent, successful. So these were the people who needed to see him clearly. I confirmed I would attend. My mother sounded relieved on the phone. I am so glad, sweetheart, she said. It means everything that you will be there as family. As family. I held the phrase after she hung up. They meant scenery. They meant proof. They meant the older daughter, brave after surgery, smiling politely so the Whitmans could see the Harpers were warm and whole. I laid out my clothes the night before, a navy dress loose enough to hide the brace, flat shoes, a coat that moved easily over the straps. I put the folders into a leather bag. They thought I was coming to surrender. I was coming to correct the record in front of every person they had hurt me to impress. My mother intercepted me in the club lobby 17 minutes before dinner. She had clearly been sent to contain the problem before it reached the dining room. She took my arm with a gentle, possessive pressure and guided me toward a corner near the coat check, smiling at people as we passed. Listen to me, she murmured. Whatever is happening with the lawyers, this is not the night. The Whitmans are here. David's whole family is here. If you embarrass us in front of them, you lose this family for good. Is a condo worth that? Her fingers tightened around my arm. It is only a condo, Natalie. Do not ruin Ashley's wedding over it. Only a condo. Again, the family hymn. I looked at my mother's polished smile, at the pearls she had borrowed because Margaret Whitman wore real ones, and felt the last quiet hope in me set itself down. It was never only a condo, I said. It was the one thing in this family none of you helped build. That is why taking it did not make you flinch. It never felt real to you because it was mine. Her smile twitched. You are being dramatic. I am being calm, I said. You should be grateful. A dramatic person would have called the Whitmans last week. Color drained from her face. Across the lobby, a bell chimed to call guests into dinner. Let's go in, I said, slipping my arm free. I would hate to miss the toast. I had spoken with Daniel that afternoon from the back seat of Grace's car. He reminded me that the legal process was already moving. The complaint was filed. The notice had frozen the condo. Detective Diaz had requested interviews with my father and Victor for the following week. You do not have to persuade anyone tonight, he said. The facts will work in court. I knew that. But Daniel did not know my family the way I did. Courtrooms were abstract to them, slow, distant, easy to explain away as paperwork confusion or a dispute blown out of proportion. What my father feared was being seen. Plainly. By the people whose opinion he had sold my home to purchase. This was not about winning the case. The case was already strong. This was about preventing the family myth from forming around it. I wanted witnesses. I wanted the truth said once calmly, with paper behind it, so no one at those tables could later pretend the story had been softer. As I walked into the dining room with my cane in one hand and the leather bag in the other, I felt strangely steady. Not joyful, not vengeful, steady. Like the pause before a long surgery when every instrument has been counted and the room is ready. The room glowed with candlelight. 48 people sat at long tables. The Whitmans held court near the front, smiling in that polite way people smile when they are evaluating everything. My parents worked the room so hard their warmth looked exhausting. My father spotted me and came over quickly. To my disgust, he took my elbow and guided me toward David and Margaret Whitman as if I were proof of something. "David, Margaret," he said, voice booming with pride. "This is our older daughter, Natalie, surgical nurse, Army veteran. She has always been the strong one in this family, always looking after everybody." The strong one, looking after everybody. I shook Margaret Whitman's cool hand and smiled. I let my father stand there enjoying the image of the generous daughter. The higher he climbed on that lie, the farther he would fall when it gave way. I took my seat. Ashley caught my eye across the room. She did not smile. She looked frightened and searching, and I gave her the smallest nod. Salads arrived. Wine was poured. Forks chimed softly against plates. Then my father stood, tapped his glass, and the room quieted exactly as if it had rehearsed for him. He began the toast he had clearly been waiting to give. "I want to thank everyone for being here as our families come together," he said. "A wedding like this takes effort. It takes love. It takes sacrifice. And I am proud of the way this family pulls together when it matters, how each of us gives what we can to make Ashley's day everything she deserves." He lifted his glass slightly toward me. The generous daughter, the family sacrifice, the fiction offered up for applause. I set my napkin beside my plate and stood. "Since we are speaking about sacrifice," I said, "I would like to add something for my sister." Every face turned toward me, warm and expectant at first. Ashley went still. My father's smile froze with the glass still raised. I kept my voice gentle, soft, even. The calm voice is the one people cannot look away from. "Ashley, I love you. I have loved you since the day Mom and Dad brought you home. That is why I want both families to understand exactly what paid for this wedding." I opened the leather bag. Less than 4 weeks ago, I had spinal surgery. I was under general anesthesia for nearly 10 hours. I lifted the first page. While I was unconscious, a deed was signed transferring my condominium. My home, worth about $438,000, was sold for $318,000 cash to my father's business partner, Victor Bennett. A murmur traveled through the room. My mother's hand flew to her throat. "The deed carries what is supposed to be my signature," I continued, placing the page where David Whitman could see it. "The notary journal states that I personally appeared and signed at 2:18 p.m. I set down the anesthesia record beside it. This is my surgical chart. At 2:18 p.m., I was face down on an operating table. A machine was breathing for me. There was a tube in my throat and a surgeon working inside my back. So the question is simple: whose hand signed my name?" The silence was complete. Even the server stopped moving. "3 days before surgery," I said, laying down the revocation, "I revoked the power of attorney they used. In writing, time-stamped. A deed signed under a revoked power with a signature certified at a time I was provably unconscious is not a family misunderstanding. It is void. My condo was never theirs to sell." My father exploded. "How dare you?" he shouted, slamming his glass down hard enough that wine splashed across the table. "How dare you do this here in front of everyone after everything this family has done for you?" "Everything this family has done for me," I repeated, without raising my voice at all. The contrast did the work. He was purple and shaking. I was standing straight with one hand on my cane. "Dad, you sold the proof that I had built a life without you. You did not do something for me. You took the one thing I made by myself. I am taking it back." My mother was crying now, reaching toward the Whitmans as if they might save her from the facts. "It is not like that. Please, this is a misunderstanding." But Margaret Whitman had already picked up the anesthesia record. Her pearls rose and fell with one controlled breath. David Whitman stared at my father with the flat expression of a man watching a business deal rot in real time. I let the silence sit for a moment. Some silences are evidence. I did not come here to ruin a wedding, I said. I came here so no one could pretend this did not happen. The police have the file. Detective Lauren Diaz has requested interviews with my father and Mr. Bennett next week. I placed a complete copy of the folder in front of my parents, carefully, almost gently. This is yours. That way there will be no confusion later about what was said tonight. My father sank into his chair as if his bones had gone soft. My mother sobbed into a napkin. The Whitmans sat upright and silent, their borrowed warmth gone cold. Then Ashley stood. The room watched my sister push back her chair in her pale rehearsal dress. Her face was wet. She walked past our parents along the length of the table and stopped beside me. I did not know it was this, she said, loud enough for the Whitmans to hear. I swear I did not. I should have asked. Natalie, I am so sorry. It was not everything. It did not repair the deed or the lies or the 7 years they had tried to cash out of me. But it was the first true thing anyone in my family had said in nearly a month. I took her hand once. Then I picked up my cane and turned toward the door because I had said what I came to say. The rest belonged to the court now. Every step hurt. The brace dug into my ribs. My back screamed. I walked anyway, slow and straight, on my own feet, exactly the way I had practiced. The law moved the way Daniel said it would, only with less resistance than my father had promised. A forged signature certified against an anesthesia record is hard to defend with a straight face. Victor Bennett's attorney reviewed the revocation, the notary journal, and the surgical chart, then advised him not to gamble on a deed he could not explain. It still took hearings, declarations, and enough paperwork to fill a banker's box. But before trial, Victor agreed to a consent judgment. The court declared the deed void. Title returned to my name, where legally it had never stopped belonging. The notice of pending litigation had frozen the property long enough to keep him from dumping the problem on an innocent buyer. The title company's underwriter settled quickly once Daniel showed them their notary had certified an impossible appearance. My legal fees were covered, along with additional damages. Detective Diaz interviewed my father and Victor. I did not attend those interviews. I gave my statement, handed over my documents, and let the system ask the questions my family had spent weeks avoiding. The wedding did not happen on its planned date. The Whitmans withdrew their support first. Ashley postponed the rest herself. She and I are slow now, careful, building something smaller than what we had but cleaner. My parents and I speak rarely. I did not make a dramatic announcement. I simply stopped being the account they could draw from. Several months later, I unlocked my own front door and stepped back into my condo. The living room was empty, the walls marked where furniture had been, but the afternoon light still crossed the floor the same way it had on the first night I owned it. I stood there with my cane, my healing back, and the key in my hand. Then I shut the door behind me, and this time no one else had a claim to it.